Welcome to the Sacred 8 Roadshow, where cosmic love meets conscious living.
We're Zsuzsi and Nikki, partners in life and purpose, and we're so glad you're here.
This podcast is a space for truth tellers, heart healers, and those walking the path of deep love and self-remembrance.
We'll explore human design, emotional wisdom, and the real work of conscious relationship.
And we're proudly sponsored by Zhia, your 24/7 AI relationship coach for healing, growth, and sacred love.
Let's dive in.
Right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us again in our sacred circle. Pull up a chair, pull up a pillow, get comfy. If you're driving, not too comfy. And welcome to episode 5 of Sacred 8 Roadshow. My name is Zsuzsi. I'm a human design coach, teacher, I'm a speaker, and now I am a podcast host, thanks to this fabulous platform.
I'm Nikki. I'm an ex-government badass and I turned soulpreneur, and I'm here to help people love themselves and doing that through various modalities, including developing an artificial intelligence app called Zhia.
So today is a very special episode because we're going to be talking about coercive control as it applies to groups, i.e. cults, and how it applies to the cult of one, i.e. toxic relationships. And for some context, the reason why this is coming up now is because very recently Netflix released a documentary called The Cult of American Apparel. And American Apparel is where I started my career in fashion in New York City in 2006. I worked for the company until 2010, and not long after that, it took a huge nosedive. But it was fraught with all sorts of controversy, even during the time that I was there. And looking back on it, it absolutely was a cult.
And really listening to you describe your experience with American Apparel and your deep dive into cults, I was able to relate that to some experiences I've had in personal relationships and really see the mirror effect of a cult, their tricks and manipulation tactics, and that it applies also to toxic relationships.
Absolutely. And I would say that I've experienced toxic relationships myself, and I can kind of copy and paste those same tactics as well. So one of the reasons why we developed Zhia is because she is an AI coach, meaning she is completely neutral. She's not here to take sides when you are in an argument or conflict with somebody, but she is here to help you sort through what is and what isn't a healthy relationship. A relationship in which you thrive, in which you feel like you can be yourself, in which you feel seen and like you have a voice. And so I wanted actually to start this episode with Zhia so that we can really define what coercive control is and go from there.
Here we go.
Hello, Zhia. Hello, Zhia. Can you describe for us the definition of coercive control as it relates to groups and cults and also individual one-on-one relationships?
Absolutely. Coercive control is essentially a pattern of behavior where one person, or sometimes a group, uses tactics to dominate and control another person. This can happen in one-on-one relationships, like in a romantic relationship where one partner slowly limits the other person's independence, decisions, or sense of self. It can also happen in group settings, like in cults, where the group leader or leaders use manipulation, isolation, or fear to keep members compliant. In essence, it's about taking away someone's sense of choice and autonomy. I hear that this is something you're curious about, and it makes total sense to want clarity on it. So can I ask, would you like a little insight on how to recognize or set boundaries around that? Or maybe a tool to help navigate it if it's something you're encountering?
I'm really curious, is it a conscious manipulation?
I hear you. It definitely can feel like a big question, and it makes total sense to want to untangle that. Conscious manipulation is indeed a real thing. Essentially, it's when someone is aware that they're using tactics to influence or control someone else's thoughts, feelings, or actions, often in a way that serves their own agenda. In the context of relationships, it might look like someone deliberately using guilt, Gaslighting or other tactics to keep another person feeling off balance or doubting themselves. In a group or cult dynamic, it might be leaders consciously leveraging members' vulnerabilities to maintain control.
So there you have it. It is a conscious manipulation. It is a well-orchestrated, often well-oiled machine. Sometimes it's a pattern that repeats from relationship to relationship. Sometimes a charismatic leader creates multiple groups over the course of their lifetime, seeing what works, kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall, and also pushing boundaries of what they can and cannot get away with. This is something that I've noticed when watching documentaries about cults, is that they don't ever start out extreme. It slowly escalates and escalates until it becomes what it is known for, i.e. a sex cult or a really extreme religious group. It is always something that starts out relatively benign, relatively innocent, and even well-meaning. Like the Children of God, which is one of the most intense cults there is, was like a study group, like a Bible study group when it started out. And actually, the most dangerous or the most extreme cults from everything that I have read is something that is generational. So it spans multiple generations, and it's usually the second generation where it becomes the most extreme, because there's already such a large group of people indoctrinated that they will literally do anything for the organization. It's not even just the one person, it's the ideology that they're doing everything for. But let's step back a little bit and talk about how you may find yourself in a situation like this, because I consider myself to be a relatively intelligent and discerning person. And I assume you do too. So what do you feel like is the cornerstone of this type of manipulation wherein intelligent and ambitious people can get sucked in?
Well, the reason I asked Zia about is it a conscious manipulation, is because I don't generally think that people are malicious like that. It's hard for me to wrap my head around that somebody would come in and have these ulterior motives. So for me, it's a disbelief in people having, because I don't think that way. So to think that other people do, it was mind blowing to me. It still is. I still want to come up with some justification or excuse and say, well, they didn't really understand what they were doing or know what they were doing. It's just past childhood trauma, which maybe it is that's led them to be where they're at. So it was between that for me, and it was between these patterns from childhood that I didn't recognize, that I thought I was in that savior of the victim complex and the wanting to belong somewhere, and knowing that I had a lot to offer and I just wanted to be loved in return. I was like, here, go me.
I think also one of the things that came up for me when revisiting my time at American Apparel was the fact that there was this sense of being outcasts together, right? So even though American Apparel was considered cool, it was the first time any of us felt cool. Being a part of something that looked really incredible from the outside made us feel a sense of pride, maybe even a sense of superiority, because we were in our early 20s. Some of us were in our late teens. And so belonging to something just felt so important at the time. And we had what I consider to be a joint mission. So that's another way that cults really hook you in. There's the love bombing, there's the belonging, there's the ideology, whatever that is. In the case of American Apparel, it was like, oh, this is sweatshop free. The clothing is made in a factory in the United States, and all of those people are fairly compensated. There's yoga at the factory. They have a masseuse. those people are paid as much as we were being paid. And that's actually what the justification for not paying us well was. Like, we were the ones who were busting our butts and, having to absorb the cost of manufacturing in the United States with our own lack of compensation. Not only that, but none of us had anything to compare it to. So it's not like we had this long history of employment where we were treated so well and then all of a sudden we found ourselves in this terrible situation. No, this was most of our first job. So being given a lot of responsibility and being asked for our input felt very grown up, very important. We were doing important work, dressing mannequins and folding t-shirts.
Well, but did it start out bad? Because you mentioned love bombing, and I feel like this is the way it is in relationships too. And even if you talk on the cult, you touched on this a little bit earlier. If in the beginning it all seems really cool and really good, and this is an innocent meeting, and you're really getting to know each other, or you think you're getting to know each other, and you're building those bonds in that relationship. And so by the time you start to see the red flags, you're kind of like, oh no, that's not who they are, and that's not what this is.
Mm-hmm.
And then the cycle begins from the love bombing to the devaluation and the whole cycle, the whole circle. And each time you're in that love bombing just long enough that you forget the rest of it. Or you're like, here we are, we're back to the beginning. Or it's kind of like they say about doing cocaine. The first time you get the biggest high. And then every time after that, you're trying to get back to that high. And I felt like
dragon.
I chased that dragon for 8 years trying to get back to that beginning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I would say that the idea that only people who are dumb and lazy join cults is a complete misnomer, because everybody that I worked with and all of the documentaries that I've watched were full of extremely ambitious, very hardworking people. Most cults run on free labor. So somebody has to really have enough energy so that they can have a source of income and be giving extreme amounts of energy and output to this organization, whatever it may be. For us, the idea that we were being promoted every couple of months and given more and more and more responsibility with very little pay increase, if any, was the thing that kept us going, because that high, that little like adrenaline rush of having one of my windows being used on the company website, or, being asked to create a training for something, or being given the opportunity to travel. I got to travel all over the East Coast and then later on in the Midwest when we were opening new stores. And that felt like, oh my gosh, I have these people that I was influencing. I was training store staff. I was known in the company. I could literally walk into a store anywhere in the country and people would know who I was. Which is like a strange thing in a retail setting, but my face was all over the company website. The internal communications were very focused on the merchandising aspect. So, I would appear doing like scarf demos and things like that. And so everybody knew who I was. They heard me on the conference calls and things like that. And so, you're like, you feel special. You feel important in a way that maybe you never have or didn't expect to so early on in your career. So yeah, that was the piece of it that kept us coming back and ignoring all of the other things. And in this case, the red flags were not just about my own lack of compensation, the lack of boundaries that the entire company had with one another. phone calls in the middle of the night, being rerouted in the middle of a project to go somewhere else. I remember towards the end, my mom was actually getting married and I was in the middle of opening a store, but because some of the shipments had gotten screwed up, my boss wanted me to stay longer, literally asking me to miss my mother's wedding. And I was like, actually,
maybe that's a boundary.
Maybe for the first time I put up a boundary. I was like, this is one of those things that I'm not going to miss.
Right.
Sorry, not sorry.
Right. I think when you're talking about the things that you saw and the good things that made you feel important and needed, it's the same thing for the relationship. So I was, in that beginning stages, you're making this bond you think you're making, where my food was amazing and all the things I was doing were amazing, and the chemistry was amazing, and so you thought you had all these things in common, and then as you go down the road, you realize it was all fish. It was all a lie, right? You didn't really like the food I liked. You just said you liked the food that I was cooking, and you didn't really like my friends I was hanging out with, and or you'd stay up till the middle of the night, and knowing I had to be up at 6 a.m. and I was supposed to just be okay with the fact you were keeping me awake, and so but then you would go back to the in between those red flags were still green flags, right? There was the words of affirmation, how much you were appreciated, how much you're needed, how much you're loved. It was the public validation and appreciation that why do you like this person? Because look at her, get to know her, you'll see. And so it was, being validated in public to other people and my family and my friends. So that was a very confusing cycle. So it's interesting that you were able to put up a boundary with your mom's wedding. I'm sitting here thinking, like, when was that first boundary for me that I went, wait a minute, maybe that's not right? Like, because you would think that it would have been the first time that I had to be up early in the morning. She was up in the middle of the night and being like, you can't tell me when to go to bed. And I'm just like, look, I just need to sleep. I need to go to work in the morning. And that wasn't acceptable. You would have thought then that would have been a boundary. But instead I was like, oh, we'll figure it out.
Well, I think that in the context of relationships, you're always encouraged that relationships are hard work, that they require a lot of compromise, and you don't want to be known as the party pooper in your relationship, obviously. And people know that, right? They're taking advantage of these tropes that are just generally being used to manipulate you from society's standpoint, that you have to give in order to receive. And the thing about relationships is that what you're describing is seriously just some fundamental underlying differences between the way that you wanted to live and between the way your ex wanted to live. And so there's actually nothing wrong or bad about it. It was just a mismatch. But because it was convenient for her, or because there was a conscious decision on her part to want to create the kind of relationship that was really only serving her and not you, there continued to be the use of that language of well, you can't tell me what to do. And as soon as somebody says that to you, you're on the defensive. Whereas the experience that I was having was more about the fact that, well, you're in New York City and the competition for jobs is fierce. It was the middle of the recession at the time, so there was a lot of that going around, well, people are getting laid off, the looming threat of your job being taken away from you. It really created an internal disharmony in which I had to override so much of what I felt was right. And it's not like I had an example of what to look for, right? You didn't have an example of what a healthy, balanced relationship was. My father was very much a workaholic and would come home frequently after days of working in his office. And I just thought, like, this is what ambitious people do. This is just what it takes to become a success. Not to mention, there weren't any friends of mine that were in better positions. Like, your early 20s in New York City is a shit show when it comes to having boundaries with your workplace. You don't feel like you have the right to push back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny that the millennial generation is known as a lazy generation. And with each generation behind us, we're like, we're the lazy ones? Are you serious? Just because these Gen Z kids are having boundaries with their place of employment from the beginning, like setting a new standard of, no, I'm not taking my phone with me everywhere. No, you're not going to be able to get a hold of me on the weekend. No, I'm not doing work after hours. Sorry. Not sorry.
If I'm replaceable, then I'm putting boundaries up.
Well, I think one of the reasons why this is happening from a work context really is that there's so many ways to make money now that doesn't include going to a 9-to-5 job. So if a job that's taking all of your time and freedom away from you, you know, it's pretty easy to say, like, yeah, I'm just going to go freelance for Fiverr, or like, yeah, I'm just going to go be a TikTok star or whatever. We didn't have that. There was no other road paved for us.
Mm-hmm.
We only understood the context of work through our parents, who were boomers. My father has had the same office for the last 40 plus years. He's been employed by the same institution. There was loyalty. There was company loyalty. So I had company loyalty, but there came a time when I just realized that this wasn't it. The analogy for both coercive relationships and cult situations is you start stacking all of the red flags onto a shelf, and then one day the shelf breaks, and it's usually something really minor. So what is that minor thing that was put on that shelf that just made the whole shelf come crashing down for you?
I don't think that was a minor thing for me. The final straw. Oh, the final straw, because I did go back after the not so red flag. Yeah.
The shelf had to break a couple of times.
The shelf had to be reinforced before it broke. So the final straw was just a seemingly ordinary, same argument we'd had a million times, and I caught myself organizing things like OCD on the table at the breakfast place we were at. And in that moment, I recognized I can't do this anymore. It's really destroying me. My nervous system is fried. I'm tired of being accused of these things. I'm tired of my words being twisted. And I finally just growled a little bit. And that was enough to send her out the door, mad that I snapped back. Reactive abuse, right? I didn't even say anything nasty. I just kind of growled and raised my voice, asking her to stop. And she took off thinking I would follow her. And I said, nope, I'm done. And so it was a little thing in the greater context of the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, you never know why it's that last fight or that final thing. I mean, like I said, a lot of what happens in cult dynamics is the leader tends to push more and more and more to see how far they can go, what they can get away with. And I guess my threshold was lower than a lot of people's because, and I actually credit my human design with this, because I feel like with the definition that I have in my chart, wherein I do have the will.
Mm.
I had the will to stay until I didn't. And then when that willpower just gets kind of cut off, then you use the will to get out of it, right? So for me, it was red flag, red flag, red flag. Well, that's a step too far. Now I'm going to pull my energy back in a huge way. And I'm going to use the energy that I was using to push through the discomfort of this situation into a new situation. Because I did recognize that I deserved better. That was
that. It was it for me, it was this little voice for the last several years that just would show up at random times to go, you know, you deserve better than this.
Mm-hmm.
You know that this isn't acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
You know that you can do better than this. And it was that little voice that got stronger and stronger as time went on. And like, I didn't just have that one argument and be able to walk away. It took me several months, couple of years to be able to do enough self-work and to learn to love myself and to start rewiring those patterns and beliefs that I didn't even know existed.
What's really interesting is that, like I said, the reason why this conversation is even happening is because that documentary about American Apparel just came out. I then made some social media posts about it, got invited to some podcasts to talk about it. And all of a sudden, I was in the middle of this spiral within myself, recognizing how a bunch of those energy signatures from my early 20s were very much alive and well within me still. Because it's not like I took some time to myself after I left that job. It was business as usual when I moved on to my next job and my next job and my next job. And so this was the first time that I feel like I was really able to untangle some of those things. The conditioning, like I said, from when I was growing up and watching my father working himself to the bone. Also, the understanding that, you know, New York City is its own sort of beast when it comes to that. But then what my sense of worthiness is, like how that got so tangled up in my productivity and my output. And I think women collectively are going through this right now because we do not have the same 24-hour cycles as men. And so for us to be equally productive in this 28-day cycle that we actually experience is a recipe for burnout, essentially. And it's interesting because this whole thing came up as we are launching Zsuzsi, and the expectation for founders is, you know, like we're falling asleep at our computers at 3 a.m. And you and I both agree, like, that's not how we want to build our lives. That's not the type of company we want to build. That's not the type of life we want to create for ourselves. That's not why we're doing this.
We're doing it to change these programs and patterns, right? So we can't go in and create her based on the old paradigm of hustle and bustle and work till you're drop dead.
Literally,
if we want to change the whole system of learning to love yourself, that's part of it. So, and what's in flow will stay in flow. And what you put your energy towards where your energy is wanting to go, then the faster that's going to be productive and go into that accelerated state. It's not, I'm going to work on this because I don't want to. Have you ever tried to work on something when you don't want to?
Yes.
And it's miserable and you're frustrated and your shoulders get tense and you get stressed out and then your quality is trash. But if you go in when you're really eager and you really have the energy to put towards it,
when you're inspired.
Inspired action is what we're trying to teach. And if you can go in inspired, when you're in flow, that the level of creativity and production that you're going to put out is going to outperform, or at least equally perform the men's get up at 5 a.m., sauna, shower, cold plunge, whatever they're doing before they even go to work every day. Craziness.
The morning routine.
The morning routine at 5 a.m. I slept for 2 hours. Let's go. I have no bags under my eyes. Whatever. I'm over here needing 9, 10 hours of sleep. Okay, so I've worked from home the last 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I have felt more productive, and I don't know the word I'm looking for, but the response I've received and the quality of my work and being able to go, I have 3 hours to sit down now. I need to get up and go for a walk. I can come back. I can sit down and do some more work. And be able to work whatever hours I needed to work to complete my job.
Game changer.
Game changer. If I had cramps that day and I needed to work from bed, I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Or just answer emails and then make it up the following day.
Well, and I just want to say that what continued from my time at American Apparel to when I started my first business in my early 30s was I took my level of output from those days and I amplified it. So, the amount that you can work when you're in your early 20s to when you're in your early 30s, now I'm in my early 40s, those are different levels of energy, and I feel like my focus is a lot more honed at this point. So it's not as scattered as it used to be. So,
but your expertise is higher too.
Exactly. And I feel like I understand how to not just delegate, but also to prioritize, because that's one of the things that kept me so off balance when I was in my first job, is that everything was an emergency, so nothing was. And I found that as I went through different companies that I worked for, where that same sort of mentality ruled this schedule, people were miserable. And it was only in the companies that knew how to set really good expectations so that we weren't running around like chickens with our heads cut off, just trying to put out fires.
Mm-hmm.
If you are at a job where you are just putting out fires all day long, just know that is potentially a manipulation tactic. But I also feel like it's just the way that a lot of managers run things. And it's keeping people destabilized in order to keep them compliant, off their axis, making mistakes. It's not true productivity.
So how do you think people can recognize that they're in these negative situations and start to work themselves out of it?
Why don't we ask Zhia? Hello, Zhia. Can you help us to identify some of the ways in which people are manipulated and how they can set boundaries for themselves?
Of course, I'd be glad to help with that. And I just want to say it's really wise to want to understand this. So a lot of times manipulation can look like things such as gaslighting, where someone makes you doubt your own reality, or isolating you from friends and family so that you feel more dependent on them. It can also be subtle, like undermining your confidence or making you feel guilty for having boundaries. Now, when it comes to setting boundaries, it's really about knowing what feels respectful and safe for you. One of the best tools is to start by identifying what your own needs and limits are. You could say something like, I need to have time to connect with my friends, or I'm not comfortable when you question my memory of events. And it's completely okay to say no or to step back if something doesn't feel right. Does that resonate with you? Or is there a specific situation you'd like to explore a bit more deeply? Let me know what comes up for you now.
If somebody wanted to journal about this, could you give us a journal prompt?
Absolutely. I'd love to offer you a journal prompt. Journaling can be such a gentle way to get clarity. So here's something you might start with. What boundaries do I need to feel safe and respected in my relationships? And then you can follow that with, in what ways have I felt my boundaries were crossed in the past? And how did that make me feel? This gives you a chance to reflect on your own needs and experiences, and it can help you tune into what feels right for you going forward. Does that feel like a helpful starting point?
Yes, thank you, Zhia.
You're so welcome. I'm really glad that resonated. Take your time with it and remember to be gentle with yourself as you explore. If any more questions come up or you just want to share how it goes, I'm here. Keep listening to your own inner wisdom.
All right, so there you have it. Miss Zia with her mic drop moment. If you guys want to try Zia for free, she is still in her beta phase as a chatbot, but she will be in her app phase soon. So definitely sign up now. Go to hellozia.com, click try Zia, and start chatting with her right away. If you like our episodes, please subscribe wherever you are listening, either on the podcast app, Spotify, or on YouTube. We would really appreciate it. If you want to drop a comment below, we would love for you to interact with this episode. And also, if you feel called, please leave us a review. It really helps push our episodes out to more people so they can get clarity from Zia and from these conversations as well.
Thank you so much for listening. And if you have any ideas on topics you want us to explore, please don't hesitate to let us know. Until next time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for joining us in this sacred circle.
If today's conversation moved something in you, share it, journal it, or bring it into your next moment of love.
And remember, you're not alone. Zia's here to support your journey anytime you need her.
Until next time, stay grounded, stay open, and stay true.
With love, always.